Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagen. We are back here for another exciting, action-packed episode of the ITR Live podcast. So welcome. Sit back, relax, buckle in, whatever you need to do to get yourself ready for John Hendricks and I are gonna thrill you for about the next 15 or 20 minutes or however long we have. I'm on my third cup of coffee this morning. John, how many are you in?
I think I'm on my third as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We're ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, we took a brief hiatus late last week. John, you were out of the office. Where were you over the weekend?
I went to visit my parents in Minnesota.
And we're not just talking, the tropical part of Minnesota, where, the Twin Cities. Remind everyone where home is.
It's north of Duluth, and we had over 5 inches of snow.
5 inches of snow. You called it beautiful. I'm not sure after the weekend we had here that we're quite ready for that. But the Iron Range of Minnesota,
That's
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and that's Trump country, right?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still surprised how many Trump campaign signs and flags and MAGA country flags that are still being displayed up there.
Yeah. That was one of the areas of the country. I mean, there were, I think, across the upper Midwest that really hard in that realignment that we've seen in American politics to Trump in those years, or to Republicans was certainly an area like that.
And even in legislative races that were used to be strong hands, and the Democrats are now starting to shift towards the Republicans because how extreme the Democrats are getting on not just social issues but on environmental issues, and that's creating a lot of concern for people.
So as there's a shift, I suppose, over the past several cycles to voting for more Republican, populist, conservative, whatever label you want to put on it. How are the folks up in the Iron Range? What are some of the things they're doing to combat inflation in Biden's economy?
Well,
see how I teed that up for you like that?
Yeah. Well, there's some that are taking his advice and are buying efficient coffee makers, but they're not working because they can't keep the coffee warm.
Mention that. This was so apparently you saw this. Biden was asked how should folks deal with inflation. So
his response was that people should invest in what he termed efficient coffee makers as well as efficient appliances so they could get a tax credit, which would then help them.
So the solution, apart from the silliness of that, the solution's more government-funded economic decisions.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of folks driving electric vehicles up north of Duluth?
No. In fact, my brother's an engineer, and there was some rich guy from the Twin Cities that came up there and went ballistic because he couldn't get a charging station for his Tesla, and there's none available. So
yeah, well, it's one thing to be left by the side of the road and somewhere, in California.
That's right.
It's another to be left by the side of the road with 5 inches of snow in October.
That's right.
In northern Minnesota. So, good. While you were gone, John, is kind of shifting to some more policy stuff. The Cato Institute had a ranking of all 50 state governors, and we put a piece out on this. ITR Foundation did last week, and Governor Reynolds, who we've celebrated on this podcast several times, got an A rating and was the highest ranking governor in the Cato Institute survey of all 50 governors. I mean, what is that based on? What does that mean?
Yeah, this was a big news story because Cato puts this out every 2 years, and the last time the report came out, she was ranked second, and Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, was first. Now Governor Reynolds is ranked first, and so what Cato does is they look at the tax and spending policies of the 50 governors, and they rate those. And basically from their ranking, they determine that Governor Reynolds is the most fiscally conservative governor in the nation. In fact, spending has only gone up a little over 2% during her time in office. So, and of course, it's not just her doing that, but it's also, we have to give credit to the legislature for kind of putting the brakes on spending and also, but she's also pushed for very what we would consider very prudent pro-growth tax reform. So a combination of making sure Iowa's budget remains balanced, keeping spending low and engaging in some good tax reforms has given her that ranking, and I think it's something to be proud of, and that's not easy to do. And we've talked a lot before on this program how, and I think we'll get into this a little bit when we discuss the editorial from the Register. But
I have thoughts.
It's always easier to say let's just spend more money,
right,
than it is to actually govern appropriately as households have to.
Right. Well, and I think that's the point. Obviously, big government liberals don't believe that fiscal restraint and cutting taxes is worthy of celebration because they philosophically believe something different about government.
Yeah.
So they're going to be dismissive of that ranking.
That's right.
But an organization that has a long history of analyzing 50 state policy making that values fiscal discipline and putting money back into taxpayer pockets has noted that Governor Reynolds, and I think you made a great point to also extend that to the legislature that has brought those bills to her desk, and should be commended for their record.
Yeah, and Cato is not, I mean, it is one of the top public policy think tanks in the nation, so they are libertarian, but they do have credibility, so this isn't just some, random group out there that's putting out a ranking. There's a lot of legitimacy behind it, and it shows that Governor Reynolds has really governed as a conservative. And it's interesting when you see that ranking because Iowa doesn't get a lot of attention, and so you have Governor DeSantis and other governors, Greg Abbott in Texas, that are getting more attention. But Governor Reynolds, I think, deserved this time in the spotlight just because what she did, what she has done, what she has led on from a fiscal policy direction, and Iowa doesn't often get recognized for that.
Well, I think that's right, just by nature of it's a middle America, smaller, I guess, relative population of some of those larger states, but we will continue to talk about it over and over, but our track record on these things is stellar.
Yes. Yeah.
And the progress that's been made, especially on income taxes over the past few years, is better than any other state in the nation.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it showcases what the two sides' priorities for government is. And you mentioned this just a minute ago. We celebrate Iowa, the journey that Iowa is on fiscally, because we believe that a smaller government, a more fiscally responsible government with lower taxes is a better thing for the state. And we've also, or at least I did, I went on a rant a couple weeks ago of just Iowa is great. Iowa's a great place to be. Maybe it's not the Iron Range and 5 inches of snow, but it's pretty good. And we like it, and we're going to celebrate it. We're going to celebrate the when other people see that. Now there's a corresponding philosophy of government, which is to spend more, spend sometimes as much as you can, even if it's at the expense of taxpayers. And that was showcased this weekend when the Des Moines Register Editorial Board released their endorsement of Deidre DeJear for governor. And at the outset, I don't want anybody confused that I particularly care what the Des Moines Register Editorial Board, who their selection is. But it underscores just the stark difference in philosophy of government here, because the Des Moines Register Editorial Board takes the opposite view. How much can we spend? How much can we invest over and over throughout this document? Invest, spend, fund over and over. And then that's the solution. So I'm gonna keep going on this, John, but you thankfully were out of the state when this released. So not that you would have read it anyway, but did you have a chance to read this?
I did.
Editorial,
based on in our pre-production meeting this morning. And
you were encouraged to read it. Yes. Okay,
yeah.
good. The thing that caught me, the reason I wanted to, I guess, mention this is, and it's not even specifics on what to spend the money on as the platitudes. So this editorial starts out early in the piece talking about Deidre DeJear has not always identified detailed proposals for executing her ideas or specified how to balance the state budget while making necessary but large investments. There's, invest word again. So to the big government liberals on the Des Moines Register editorial board, it doesn't matter how we're going to do it. It doesn't matter how we're going to pay for it, as long as we promise to do lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And that showcases what we're talking about here. Whereas our conservative legislature and Governor Reynolds have actually done that. And I know from my time in the legislature, in the House Republican caucus, going through the budget line by line, what do we need? Mm-hmm. What do we not need? Separating wants from needs and wishes, and being able to stand up and say no sometimes to what might seem like a worthy cause, because it just doesn't rise to the level. There are other things we need to spend these taxpayer money on. And it actually is the hard work of digging into that budget and understanding that these are taxpayer dollars and
That's
we
right.
can't just spend them all.
Yeah.
So, okay, it's time for you to get a word in, John.
No, you're absolutely right. And, we almost see the same thing with the national media and how they're handling inflation, and President Biden basically making excuses that, legislation such as the Inflation Reduction Act are actually going to reduce costs for Americans. And what's interesting here in their endorsement, as you said, she's promising all these different programs, fully fund education. We hear that all the time.
Right.
From Democrats. It's never defined. And we know that 80% of the general fund budget is already being consumed by basically education and Medicaid. And then when you take Medicaid off, a majority of the budget is for public education. And the legislature and Governor Reynolds have continued to actually spend more on education. The education budget hasn't decreased. In fact, one could say that state spending has continued to increase at a very reasonable level. And so it's not like there's been a gutting here of key services. And if the Register and Deidre DeJear and the Democrats are right, then some of the best run states in the nation should be California and Illinois. I mean, if
right.
the tax and spend agenda works, then why are we not seeing better results in those states? And again, it's always easier to say we need to spend more, and they forget. Iowa has to balance their budget. And so that means if you want to spend more money on education, water quality, mental health, whatever it is, then whose taxes are you going to increase to fund that new spending?
That's right.
Or what else are you going to cut to increase that spending?
Well, and we've seen Democrats, candidates, we've got a substantial balance in the taxpayer relief fund. They all want to spend it.
Yes, yeah.
There's no conversation of how to put those dollars back into the pockets of Iowans, or how to use that to bridge ourselves to some other reduced tax. They just see the dollars and want to spend them, and really no acknowledgement that would be creating new ongoing obligations with that money.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But we promised more money for education, so that's good.
Yeah.
And that's as far as the analysis goes.
Yeah. And if we don't have time today, but if one wanted to have a lengthy debate on education policy, more money does not necessarily translate into better results.
Right. And that's ultimately what we want, right?
Yeah.
But more money is the simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The simple response.
Yeah.
And within the education conversation there, in this article about spending more taxpayer money, which in their mind is just government money. But there is no mention of inflation, which is the number one issue on the minds of voters right now. There is no mention of inflation at all, except in one spot, which is inflation's impact on government. Inside the education funding piece, that the only mention of education or of inflation is that inflation cuts the value of the dollars that education gets, that schools get. Let's just ignore the impact of inflation on family budgets across the state of Iowa. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The only thing is government, a government-focused and a government-centric idea of what's best for Iowa.
Yeah. This model is basically the government can pick and choose what policies are the best, pick and choose what outcomes they want to see. And like you said, they don't realize, or either they don't want to realize, or they forget that the tax dollars are coming from hardworking individuals and businesses that are running this state. And I think Governor Reynolds said that. It was, I thought it was one of her best quotes when she said that, Main Street is better than the halls of government. I'm just paraphrasing that, but I think it's frustrating because it's the inflation cost is tremendous. I mean, just buying groceries the other day, and just not even having 4 bags coming out of Hy-Vee and almost paying $100 for really nothing, and it's getting scary, and they're downplaying this.
Yeah. Then there's one other. I think that's right. It just simply showcases the differences here.
But I guess that means we should just get efficient appliances and coffee makers and get the tax credits, and that will take care of everything.
Yeah, that's right. There's one piece in here that's just borderline offensive, and I can't help myself but to talk about it. And then I don't even want to spend much time on it. But in talking about the differences of visions between Governor Reynolds and Deidre DeJear, and attacking Governor Reynolds on, and it comes on the second half of an article of a piece about her enacting tax cuts, which is one of her greatest achievements, but dismissing and sometimes dehumanizing people who disagree with her. And this is sometimes what gets dangerous about the left's mindset on these things, is that if you disagree with them, if you disagree with liberal orthodoxy, that you are somehow mean, evil, wrong. And no, that's not the case. We simply have a different vision. And that really just kind of grated at me a little bit.
Yeah, that there's no founding for that. I can't even think of one example. And I think this is the as you said, this is where Democrats and liberals, basically, if you don't agree with their agenda, then they start making it personal, and they'll level any kind of ism at someone to try to get points. And this is it's just like their editorial on the Reynolds campaign ad from the coffee shop. That was ridiculous as well. And most, if anybody's honest, they would agree with that same. That wasn't racist. I mean,
and the foundation, the member of Congress that was on that ad is now invited to Iowa for a campaign rally.
Yeah,
but still, okay. I think to wrap this all up, go to one more thing on this piece that their editorial says. And it's at the outset. Incumbent Governor Kim Reynolds has been promoting an already idyllic Iowa. Yes, please. Governor Reynolds has been a champion for the state, as we've talked about on here. Iowa is a great place. There are great things happening. Our small towns are starting to come back.
Yeah.
There are people at work. Our economy is outperforming many other places in this country. Our agriculture economy is doing well. These are strong communities and it's a great place to be. It's a great place to raise a family. And if the worst thing that Governor Reynolds does is go out and champion how great Iowa is, then you know what? We're doing pretty well.
After reading that editorial, first thing I thought about is this is just pure desperation on their part because they have nothing to run on. And you could tell that they're trying to find something to be critical of.
Yeah. And you can do that with anyone.
Yes.
There's, if you want to find fault with Iowa, with Iowa's leaders, I'm sure there are things that we can find. But they somehow believe that she is not, there's something wrong with going out and celebrating Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And I just completely, wholeheartedly reject that notion.
It's the whole liberal mindset that not just something wrong with Iowa, but something wrong with conservatives. It goes back to Hillary Clinton's deplorables, to Obama's clinging to their guns and Bibles because they're worried, and it just goes back to their they do not have any respect for, if you want to say, conservative or traditional values, which is what mainstream Iowa is about.
That's right. Well, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Iowa is great. Iowa's my home. It's an exciting time to be an Iowan, and I am going to enthusiastically support those that share that vision and a vision of where Iowa is going. And I'm very thankful that I'm an Iowan, and I'm very thankful that Kim Reynolds is my governor.
Yeah, and I think the record speaks for itself. I mean, just compare Iowa to Illinois, Iowa to these other blue states that are, you're seeing tremendous bounce of homelessness, crime out of control, a lot of serious problems in these states, financial problems. That liberal tax and spend record doesn't work.
Nope. It just doesn't work, and we're proving it in Iowa.
Yes.
Because we can easily compare and contrast. So with that, John, I think we need to wrap things up.
Okay.
So welcome back to the tropical South.
Yeah.
And we're glad to have you back behind the microphone where you belong, and celebrating Iowa and celebrating everything that is going right here. And we will we'll wrap it up there. Please remember to give us a good review, 5-star rating. Tell your friends, like and subscribe, whatever piece of positive feedback we can get. We appreciate. I know John does. Anyway, but with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.